CGQ Plus.
So it's funny because people keep leaving these comments on this channel saying, when are you making the next episode of Flashback? When's the next episode of Flashback coming out? And I've just been in this mode where I was just like all about doing the Sega Genesis in 1990. But it's funny because I'm just like, geez, like hold your horses, I'll make another one, But then I sat down a few minutes ago to just really quickly kind of browse through the last one, just to make sure I'm not like retelling the same story or something. And then I realized I hadn't uploaded an episode of Flashback since like early February. And so, that's why people are kind of curious. So, sorry about that. But like I said, I get in this mode where all I cared about was trying to get that Sega Genesis in 1990 video done. Which if it makes you guys feel any better, it drives my wife nuts too. So it's not just you guys. But anyway, so last time on the show, I believe we talked about how I got a color monitor for my computer, and we talked about SimCity and Arkanoid. And so, obviously, since I haven't done one of these episodes in a few months, I've had kind of a lot of time to think about it. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk a little bit more about is Stuart, only because I feel like we're going to pretty quickly kind of move past him, just because he ended up moving away at some point. And, this is something like the 24th episode of Flashback, something like that. And if you go back to the first 23, how many of those episodes did I not mention Jonathan's name in? Maybe not any of them. And obviously we're not going to talk about Stewart for 23 episodes. And so I guess I kind of wanted to just sort of talk about his importance, if that makes sense. I don't know, man, I'm not how to start this, I guess. But so, people ask me a lot, oh, you should try to get Jonathan on the show. Have you reached out to Jonathan? And, I try not to really make a big deal about it. But, as I sort of alluded to, I did that episode that was called like Video Game Friends or something like that. And I was talking about how when you're a kid, it's like you only really have to have like a single point of commonality with another kid, and you can be friends with that kid. And so like when I was growing up, that could just be that you both have Nintendos, or you both have BMX bikes and you want to go like off-roading, or you're both into Transformers or whatever. And but I should also say that I think proximity also has something to do with that. So the thing with Jonathan is that he lived 5 houses down from me, something like that, 5, 6 houses down from me. We were generally in the same class. I mean, we were in the same grade, but usually we also ended up in the same class in school. And we did have, similar interests. I mean, we were, elementary school aged boys in the 80s. Like we all had the same interests back then. It was, video games and cartoons and, skateboards or whatever else. But, people often want to know, well, what happened to Jonathan? I've kind of talked about it a little bit before. And the way I always just kind of describe it is to just basically say that we grew apart. And it's really true, because the older you get, the more you kind of, I think, become your own person. Like even as early as when you're in your early teens. I'm not saying you're a grown up when you're in your early teens, but you're starting to kind of form the person that you're going to become. And at that point, you may find that you're not really compatible with somebody else anymore as a friend. But I have tried to reach out to him a couple of times, and I actually told the whole story in Discord, I think, one time of what happened. But basically, it's like, I already don't really have any interest in trying to like reconnect with him, not because I like hate him or something, but just because I don't think we would have anything to talk about. But also just sort of based on the way it went down when I've tried to just sort of reach out and say hi, like through Facebook or Twitter, just kind of reminded me of why I'm not friends with him anymore in the first place. And I'd really kind of like to just sort of leave it at that. And part of the reason that I wanted to bring this up is just that when I look back on, sort of the Jonathan years, if you want to call them that, I have all these fond memories, but they're really not of him. They're of like some of the stuff that we did. It was like all these cool Nintendo games that I got to play, or, sitting on his living room floor watching, the Disney afternoon cartoons like, DuckTales and whatnot. or playing with Star Wars toys or whatever else. And it's just, we had a very, immature kind of friendship. It was just more about like, I got to play with all these iconic toys or this or that. And we had fun together. And I'm not trying to belittle anything. But, when I met Stuart, we were teenagers and we became more of what I would call like real friends. Like he really did become kind of like my best friend, and I almost kind of looked at him in sort of a fraternal way. And I've already told the story of how I met Stuart. It was right after I got my computer, the Epson Equity 2, and he overheard me telling this other kid in PE class, and he came over and just, I won't say he introduced himself because we've been going to the same schools for years, and so it's not like he knew I was Chris and he was Stuart, but maybe we'd never really talked to each other. And we just kind of became just fast friends. And so I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that and sort of the nature of that friendship and some of my memories of him and just being friends with him. Because when I look back on my friendship with Stuart, it's about him and the things that we did together as friends. It wasn't about the thing we were doing. It was more about doing it with him. Whereas with Jonathan, it was sort of the reverse of that. So, I tried to think of all the different things that I could talk about with him. It's just like I could spend hours probably telling all of these little, very short stories that really had no point to them and probably wouldn't be that entertaining to listen to. So I don't want to like go through things too much, but I thought of a few things that I thought were kind of funny or interesting, or I actually have some visual aids, so that'll be exciting. But so one of the things I wanted to kind of mention, I said how with Jonathan rather, he in that friendship, he was the have and I was the have not, right? Like he had all these things, like all these Nintendo games, he had all these toys. He had like this normal nuclear family. They even had they had nicer cars than we did. I've talked previously about, just being able to have name brand things and how when you're a kid and you don't really have any wisdom or a real like world outlook, for some reason that kind of stuff's more important to you. And so everything with him, I felt like, he has this and he has that and blah, blah, blah. And it's not a good way to be. Right. And with Stuart, I felt like that was somebody who was kind of more on like the same like socioeconomic level as I was. We were both like, neither one of us was particularly popular, but it's not like we were outcasts either. Like we had our friends at school, but whatever. And as I mentioned, Stuart's dad worked for Sierra as a game programmer, but that was like a part-time job. I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I mentioned this, that he was also a student, like a full-time student studying computer science at the local university. And so I think he was working like part-time for Sierra. Like he just worked out of his home. He had, like I mentioned before, he had like his home office that had like the padlock or a deadbolt on it. We couldn't go into because he had all this expensive computer stuff in there. But like he never got up in the morning and like drove up to Oakhurst to go to like the Sierra offices because he didn't need to do that. So because he was just a part-time employee. But then Stuart's mother also just did like part-time work. It's almost like they were both sort of like independent contractors. Stuart's mom was like a seamstress, I guess you would call it. She made costumes for the local theater group, but that wasn't a full-time job either, so like they didn't have a lot of money. That's my point, and for that reason, I just found them more relatable and I found Stuart more relatable. And sometimes I feel funny talking about this stuff because I can see somebody watching the show and being like, well, wait a minute. Like, you say you don't have any money and you had a computer and like, and I was actually curious about that, right? Because I'm sitting here saying like, oh yeah, I had to eat like, name brand macaroni or not name brand, store brand macaroni and cheese from wherever for, $4 for $1 from the store. And then all of a sudden I have a computer. And after doing the last couple episodes, I'm like, yeah, like how did that happen? And so I was on the phone with my mom at some point and I asked her, I said, hey, you remember that Epson computer? And she said, oh yeah, and sorry, I left my speakers on. And so I asked her, I said, how did we afford that? Like, where did this computer come from? And she basically just told me that not a windfall, but she got a little bit of extra money. And that both her and my grandma agreed that, I keep bumping the microphone. They both agreed that like a computer was an important thing for me to have. You know, like my grandma read like Time magazine, and like I could totally imagine that maybe there was an article in there about computers being the future or something, and they're like, well, we gotta get this kid a computer so we can learn stuff. And you know, and she said it, you know, the computer was like, for some reason, I think I even said this in the show, that I thought the computer was like $250, which I even did some research, and I was like, there's no way that computer was, you know, that computer was old, but it wasn't like obsolete. And I think she said she thought she paid something like $400 for it, but I guess like my grandma paid for half of it too. So, because I mean, certainly at that time, having a computer was like a luxury item. And you know, same thing with Stewart, right? Stewart had his own computer because it was his hand-me-down from his dad, because his dad was a computer programmer. But like outside of that, you know, I didn't get to wear like, you know, the quote unquote cool kids clothes, and you know, I was still eating like ramen noodles and whatnot. We didn't have cable TV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that Stewart was in like the same situation, and so it just creates like a different friendship dynamic, right? Because you're on the same level with the person. And, you know, that like the fact that we didn't have money for stuff, like if we wanted money for stuff, we would figure out how to get money. And that wasn't going to our parents and saying, hey, can I have $10? It was like earning it. You know, like he was the first person that I don't think it ever really occurred to me that you could like earn money as a kid outside of like your own parents. You know, like I would go to my mom and be like, oh, honey, you know, can I, you know, I want $10 for something. Is there something I can do? Or my grandma was really good about that. You know, I could never ask my grandmother for money. Like if I just went to my grandma and said, hey, can I have $10 for something? She'd be like, no, get out of here. But I could just say like, hey, grandma, can I earn $10 for, you know, I need $10. You have something that I can do? Sorry, I feel like I have a hair or something. Something's tickling my nose. And then she would say, oh yeah, sure. You know, and so like, as an example, you know, she might say, okay, wash all the windows in the house inside and out, and I'll give you like $10, which is really not bad. Because if you think about it, it probably takes about, I don't know, like an hour to do that. You know, you walk around every room with like, you know, some Windex and a roll of paper towels, wash them all on the inside, go around the outside, wash them on the outside. You might have to take the screens off, but you know, maybe an hour, a little bit more, $10, not bad. Because what was minimum wage in like the, you know, late 80s, early 90s, like 3 something an hour. So, but like another thing that Stuart and I would do, oh, sorry, I didn't finish the first thing. So Stuart would like go work for his neighbors. You know, he would work out these deals with his neighbors, you know, doing whatever odd jobs they needed, and maybe getting paid something like $4 an hour, which, you know, was slightly above minimum wage, I think, at that time. And I think it had never occurred to me that you could just like do that. And so like I've made reference in the past to how I would ride my bike around the neighborhood with like a leaf rake across my handlebars. And that was really something I kind of got from him, because I think it hadn't occurred to me like, oh, you can just go mow your neighbor's lawn for $10. Like, wow, that'd be cool. And so if we wanted money for something, that's just what we would do. And which was cool. And I think it taught me a valuable lesson for the future. And I don't know, maybe it was a sense of freedom or independence. I don't really know, but like that was something that Jonathan and I like never would have done. And I don't know, I always had a good time doing it. I have very fond memories of that kind of stuff. And like Stewart was very active. You know, he was a very like athletic, fit person. He was very like athletically gifted. And like we used to play in junior high, we had ping pong tables. And so we would go play ping pong sometimes at lunch. But he was like really good at playing ping pong. Like he taught me about like, you know, putting spin on the ball or trying to hit it so it just hits the edge of the table and bounces away. Like he loved doing that kind of stuff. And you know, but he was just like instantly good at it. Or one of the things we used to do almost every day when I was in 8th grade was play basketball. We would play 2-on-2 basketball with these same 2 other kids. And I can't remember anything about these 2 other kids except for what one of them looked like, because he looked like he was about 26, even though he was like 13. I mean, I feel like there's, you know, a few kids like this in like every junior high where it's just like somehow he already went through puberty. Like he had a mustache, you know, I mean, I don't know what else he had, but I'm saying like we all still look like little kids. And like somehow you felt like he could walk into 7-Eleven and buy a 6-pack, even though he was the same age as we were. And the other thing I just remember about him is he always wore, this was back in the time when starter jackets were really popular. I don't know. Does Starter even exist as a brand anymore? I don't know. But, there were those iconic Starter jackets that were sort of like that. They had sort of that satin look to them, like they were a little bit shiny, and they had the snaps up the front. And I think it started with baseball, but then later they had football. Like I have a 49er Starter jacket, but like back around this time, I ended up getting a Starter jacket. That was one of the last presents my dad ever bought me, actually. It was a Boston Red Sox starter jacket. And I wanted a Red Sox starter jacket, not because I liked the Red Sox, but because I liked Cheers so much. And the main character, Sam, of course, was an ex-Red Sox player. And then the show took place in Boston. But anyway, so we used to play basketball every day together, like at I don't think you called it recess anymore in junior high, maybe just break. And then also at lunch, but we'd play 2-on-2. But the thing is, Stuart was so much better than the rest of us. Like I was the worst, like by far. The other two kids were all right. And then Stuart was like very good at basketball. And so we always had to mix up the teams because whoever was paired up with Stuart, like you were going to win. That was like kind of a given. But we went through the process anyway of playing the game, even though the outcome was already decided. But like Stuart also had a basketball hoop over his garage. And so we would play one-on-one, in his driveway, or we would just, play around the world or whatever. We also played a lot of catch. He had a baseball mitt, and I still had that baseball mitt that my dad had bought me several years earlier. And so, like, we used to just go, over into the fields by my high school, and we would just play catch, which is funny because now, like, I'm almost, 42 now. Like, I would kill to have somebody I could go play catch with. I actually tried to get my wife to do it. I bought my wife a baseball mitt, but I tried to throw the baseball to her, and she's like afraid of it. And so at the last minute, she gets out of the way because she thinks it's going to hit her in the face. But just the simplicity of just playing catch with somebody, because we would just go out into the field for an hour or two and would just be throwing the ball back and forth and just shooting the breeze, talking about whatever, talking about girls or talking about, computer games or fantasizing about if we had as much money as we wanted, like what would be the specs of the computer we would build or just whatever. And we used to also, for some reason, play a lot of tennis. And I don't know how he had these neighbors that he was, again, working for they were really into tennis. And they had like a tennis racket they weren't using anymore, and they gave it to him. It was a pretty nice tennis racket. And so he was kind of getting into tennis. And so I went and bought a tennis racket. I went into like a sporting goods store and bought like the cheapest tennis racket you could get. And we would play tennis together. We would go to the tennis courts at my high school, which is by my house, and just play tennis together. He, of course, was amazing at tennis, just like everything else. But like he was very patient. He was trying to teach me. Like he would try to coach me, like, oh, do this or do that. Even though he was like killing me, he wasn't. It's not like he was taking pleasure in it. I'm sure he was having a good time, but it's like he was trying to help me get better too. And in general, I would say that about him. He was just a very patient person. Like, he really taught me how to use my computer when I was totally clueless, but was just very patient about it, or we'd be playing like Sierra adventure games together. And I would always get so frustrated. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. We'd be playing, those games like Police Quest and Space Quest, like there's like a million ways to die in those games. And I would get so frustrated, and he would never just give me the answer. He would just give me hints. He's like, well, what if you have this in your inventory? Like, well, what if you did something with that, So yeah, in a way, even though we were basically the same age, it's almost like he was like an older brother to me in some ways. But anyway, so just a few stories that I thought of with him. I said that his mom was a seamstress, and she made costumes, and she made my Halloween costume for me one year. And I think this was from an episode of Mork and Mindy, where I don't know if he was in some alternate dimension or what, but I remember it was Robin Williams, and he was dressed up like a court jester. And then he had this little hand puppet that itself was also a court jester, but that the hand puppet was his agent, Saul. And something about that, I just thought it was really funny. And so I think I showed it to Stuart's mom, and she made me. It was just the top, it was like the jester top, but then she actually made the hand puppet, and it was a really cool hand puppet. I don't know whatever happened to that. I can't imagine I would throw something like that away. I mean, it was made out of fabric and everything, but she did a really nice job. And so yeah, that was I think because Stuart and I would go trick or treating. That was probably in 8th grade. We would go trick or treating. I think ninth. I think I probably mentioned this. I did in the Halloween special. I think 9th grade was the last time I went trick or treating. But I think this was during. No, I know this was during 8th grade because 9th grade I was dark man, which really just meant I wrapped gauze around my head. But Stuart's mom was really cool, and I had this cool relationship with her. Like I mentioned like Jonathan's dad. I was always kind of scared of him, because he was always real serious. Like I never saw the guy smile. But even like Jonathan's mom, like she was nice, but in a way that like you didn't really want to talk to her. Like there was something about her. I don't know. Jonathan's parents were just weird, and so I just like I never really felt like 100% welcome in their house. And maybe I'm just sensitive to that kind of stuff. But like I would go to Stuart's house, and like Stuart's mom and I just always had like this relationship where like I could walk into their house, and like I was a real smart aleck when I was a kid, like not in a disrespectful way, but I just had sort of this like in a funny way, although I'm sure some people thought it was disrespectful, but I'd make these little, smart alecky comments. And like, so I'd walk into Stuart's house and, I'd make some kind of smart alecky comment to Stuart's mom, and she would just like zing me right back. Which I just always thought that was cool. So I always thought she was like a real cool lady. And she was Mexican. And I mean, she still is. She was a very good cook. Because like I said, they didn't really have a lot of money. They were on kind of like a shoestring budget. So Stuart's mom made like all the food that they ever ate. Like they did not like go out to dinner ever. But she would cook like I don't think I'd ever even heard of a tamale before. Or if I did, like I maybe knew the word, but I had no idea what a tamal was. And like I remember one time, I think I was probably spending I was spending the night over there, and it was maybe a little bit later at night, like not super late, but well after dinner time. And Stuart and I were constantly eating. Like I said, Stuart and I were very active. And so I think, and plus we were like, 13 years old. So, I mean, I think all 13-year-olds eat a lot, but, we were constantly looking for food, and we opened the fridge and there was a whole plate of tamales sitting there. And I think at this point I had still never had a tamale. Maybe the next day was when I had one, but yeah, I said, "Oh, what are those things?" And he's like, "Oh, those are tamales." I was like, "Well, can I have one?" And he's like, "Yeah, go ahead." And so I take one out and I start eating it, and I'm like, "Oh, this is terrible." And so for anybody that doesn't know what a tamale is, really quick, you either get like a corn husk or a banana leaf, and it's like masa that's mixed with a little bit of oil and some salt and some water, so it makes like sort of this pasty. I don't know, it's like spackle, and you rub that all on one side of you get like a nice layer of that on one side of the leaf. Then you put some kind of filling, whether it's like a vegetarian filling, like some cheese and some zucchini, or beans, or more commonly it's meat, like either chicken or pork, in some kind of a sauce, like a slow cooked meat or something. You put that in there and you wrap the whole thing up. And sometimes, depending on what kind of leaf you use, you have to tie it up. It doesn't matter. And then you cook them by steaming them, because that cooks the masa and it kind of firms it up. And then I don't know I think that usually the meat in the middle is like already cooked, because you'd want to get like if you like got some pork and like slow cooked it and like some green salsa. Anyway, but the masa part, the corn meal is not cooked. And so that was the problem. I was eating a raw tamal. And so Stuart's mom came out, and of course I was in trouble, because that was like the dinner for the next day. And she's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Like she used to always get mad, but you could tell you weren't like really in trouble. But at the same time, if you didn't knock off whatever you were doing, you were going to be, because she would kind of have like this like wry smile on her face. But at the same time, you kind of knew she meant business. And so like, she would chase us out of there, but so I ate that raw tamal. But the other thing I was going to say, so that was the first time and one of the only times that I've ever had homemade tortillas, because she used to make homemade flour tortillas. I mean, I've also had homemade corn tortillas, but that's not what she made. And I don't think these are popular anymore. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the stove that they had in their house was one of those stoves where it was just a smooth glass top, and the burners were like underneath this like tempered glass. And so she would literally cook the tortillas directly on the glass. Like she would clean it and then turn the burner on, and then she was, she had this whole big bowl of like tortilla dough. she'd roll it out and she'd cook it right on the glass top. And then she just had like a big plate and she was just throwing the tortillas on there and like, I think she had like multiple burners going and they were done and she was just throwing them on the plate, making more and throwing them on the plate, And, we used to go in there whenever she was making tortillas and, you would open Stewart's fridge and it was full of like there'd be like the gallon sized, big, I don't know, it's like a vat almost of like mayonnaise or mustard or not butter, but margarine, like the big tub, because they were going to some kind of price club or something and getting this stuff because it was cheaper. And so I just remember they had like this huge tub of imperial margarine, because this was the time when like the margarine lobbyists had convinced everybody that butter was bad for you, right? And so everybody was eating margarine when I was a kid. And so we had this huge tub of margarine and we had this big jar of like apricot jam or apricot preserves. And we did this every time she made tortillas, is we were just pulling them off of the top of the pile so they were still hot from coming off of the stove. And we would smear them with some of that margarine, which would melt instantly because the thing was hot. And then we would smear some apricot preserves on there. And then you'd roll it up like a little taquito and just eat it. And oh man, if you've never tried something like that, just go to the store and just buy some flour tortillas and just heat them up. Butter and apricot preserves. You can use like strawberry or something, but it's not as good. I don't know what it is about like apricot and flour tortillas just goes really well together. But we would eat so many of those things and she would just kind of put up with it. And then she would just at some point decide, okay, they've had enough. And it was that same thing, all right, you guys, you two have had enough. You get out of here now, And she would say it in a way that, again, it's like she wasn't being like mean or strict, or you just kind of knew like, okay, yeah. But at the same time, if you crossed her, there was going to be trouble, so we would get out of there. But yeah, I mean, we used to stuff our faces with those things. And then speaking of stuffing our faces with things, another thing they had a huge jar of, this was just one time that I remember, but there was this huge jar in the fridge of sliced, pickled jalapenos. Like, if you go to like a taqueria and you get some tacos, they'll give you on the side, like, oh, here's a few, sliced pickled jalapenos. Or like, if you go to Subway sandwich, they put them on the sandwich. And for some reason, they had this whole jar of these sliced jalapenos. And I don't know what got into it. I mean, they're really good. The thing is, when you eat something spicy, it's like a flavor enhancer. So even though it's like spicy and it's burning your mouth, it's like it opens up your taste buds. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's how it works even, but and so we took this jar out and we start eating these pickled jalapenos. And we're like, oh, it had sliced carrots in it too. It was that jalapeno and carrot mix. And we're eating these things, and then our mouths are like burning. And in his kitchen, they had like a water cooler, like a standard water cooler. But I don't know where they got it. It wasn't like they had like Alhambra coming to their house. Like they had a big 5-gallon bottle that was glass that they would literally take it outside and fill it up with a garden hose and then bring it in and just stick it on top of the water cooler. But it was awesome because the water that came out of there must have been like 1 degree above freezing. It was this cold water. And so, we'd be over at his house, playing basketball or doing whatever outside or swimming. They had a pool. It was a rental house, but like, they had a pool and part of Stuart's job was to take care of the pool. So we used to go swimming and everything, but we would get thirsty and we would come inside and just start chugging this water. But, anyway, we're like, we're eating all these sliced jalapenos. And so we're just like downing this water. And I remember it was at his house. He had a bunch of these Tupperware, these old school Tupperware cups. And we just keep filling it up with water and we're just drinking. And I mean, we got in trouble. And I think his mom was like, you guys shouldn't be eating all those jalapenos. And then we finally ate so many of them. It was the same thing. Okay, you guys get out of here now, And I don't want to get graphic because this is like kind of a family show. But, sometimes you eat, something that burns going in, burns coming out. Like I have never had anything at that level before or since. Like I can't even tell you without getting more graphic than I'm comfortable getting how much that hurt. But it's like I've never forgotten it. And now I can just laugh about it. And I think I even remember asking Stuart, like I told him what happened. He's like, that happened to you? And he's like, because he was probably used to eating spicy stuff. He's like, no, I'm fine. I was like, wow, because it was bad. And then another story. Oh, and this is where the visual aids come in. Not with the ring sting thing, but I've told this story before on a magazine read-through episode, but now I have the visual aids to go along with it. So I'm going to tell the story again. My mom had this job. I mentioned she managed like an amusement park. So she always had to work on the weekends. And so every weekend my mom wasn't around from 8 to 5 or whatever. And my grandma would play bridge, the card game bridge, like almost every day. She didn't go on Saturdays, but she went on Sundays. And I would be home alone all day. And which in 8th grade, 9th grade wasn't that big of a deal because usually I would hang out with Stuart that day. Either he would come over to my house or I'd go over to his house, or we'd ride our bikes somewhere else or go play catch or play tennis or whatever. And I didn't look up when this movie came out, but it was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie. We had it. My mom bought it. I guess she liked it, or maybe I liked it. I don't know. This was back when we would buy the previously viewed VHS tapes at the video store, because my mom and I would go to the video store probably every week, pretty much. We would go to this place called Video Zone, and they had some deal where it was five movies for 5 days for $5, but they couldn't be new releases. But I mean, this place was huge, and they had a large catalog, therefore, of movies. And so we'd go in there, maybe she'd pick 3 movies and I'd pick 2, or however that would work out. But I would always go kind of nose through the previously viewed videotapes baskets to see if there's anything cool. And sometimes I also found video games that way. But anyway, we got Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves that way. And I like that movie. And, if I was home alone on the weekends, we didn't have cable. And one of the ways I would kill time on the weekends, if I got sick temporarily of playing video games or there was nothing good on TV, is I'd throw on a movie. If Stewart wasn't available and I didn't really have anywhere I felt like going, I'd watch movies or something. And so there's this scene in it's more of a montage really in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, right? Maid Marian has already now been kidnapped by the sheriff of Nottingham and his people. And Robin Hood and the Merry Men are like gearing up to go invade the castle and save Maid Marian. And so they're showing like this montage, right? Because you have Robin, and then you have Morgan Freeman's character, wasn't that Azim? Azim? They had come back from the Crusades, right? So like they knew how to fight, but you had all these merry men who they didn't know how to do anything, right? They were just hanging out in the forest. And so like they're like training them, like here's how to use a bow and here's how to sword fight. But they have these couple little shots where they were showing that they were making arrowheads, like they were smelting metal and then pouring it into these little molds that they had carved into some wet wood or something. And they were making arrowheads, and then they were sharpening them. And for some reason, I kind of keyed into that, and I was like, oh, I want to try doing that, And so one Sunday, Stuart comes over, and I said, and I think we had already watched the movie together or something, or maybe what seems more likely is that he came over and we watched the movie and then decided, hey, we should do that. So we did. We had this big, not big, but there's like the Weber brand barbecues, like they call them the kettle barbecues, I think. The black ones, they're just like a big black orb, and you just pull the whole lid off. And we had one of those, and we had recently had our roof like reshingled or whatever, because it had like just wooden shingles, but this was like at the time where everybody was moving from like wood shingles to like the composite roofing material, because wood shingles are a horrible fire hazard. My mom wanted to keep the shingles because one of the main ways we heated the house was with the fireplace. Both my mom and my grandma were not really down with running the heater or the air conditioner. And so we would often have a fire going in the fireplace. And so to her, it was like, this is all wood that we can burn in the fireplace. Because, it was redwood and it wasn't treated or anything. So it's safe to burn, But so it must have been like a cord's worth of wood. Goodness. Just stacked up like behind the garage. And redwood burns pretty hot. And So Stuart and I took this kettle barbecue and rolled it out into the middle of the backyard because we just had it was just grass back there. And so we wanted to get it away from the house, not near any trees. We just had it in the middle of the backyard. I think we took the hose and had that out there in case, God forbid, something happened. And we built a fire in this kettle barbecue out of these wood shingles. And we just kept feeding the fire and feeding the fire and feeding. It was just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I got a steel. We had cats, right? So we had these cat food cans. There was always tons of cat food cans in the recycling bin. And back then they were still made out of steel. Now, I think anything you buy that's canned, it's a pretty flimsy can, just because it's better for the environment. There's no reason for it to be so thick or made out of steel in the first place. But back then they were. And so I got this cat food can, and washed it. And I just threw a big handful of pennies, because I had a penny jar. And I threw this big handful of pennies into this cat food can. And then I had anybody who has a fireplace, right? You have those fireplace tools. You have they have the stoker thing, the poker with the hook on it. Then you have the little broom that nobody ever used. And then oftentimes you'd have these big gigantic tongs for if you had to reach in there and move a log or something. And so that's what I was using, as I had these big tongs, because I'm not going to get anywhere near that fire. And so I used the tongs to put the can in the fire. And we didn't really know what to expect, because we didn't know what we were doing. And we just let it sit there. And sure enough, these pennies start melting. And as you may or may not know, pennies are made out of zinc and are just coated with copper. And the copper was oxidizing and turning into some kind of, copper oxide that was just like a powder that was not turning into molten metal, but underneath it was all of this molten zinc. And I think part of it, we couldn't believe it even worked, and but it did. So we got these big blocks of clay that my mom had, because my mom sort of fancied herself as an artist. And so she had these blocks of clay, and I carved shapes into the clay. I carved the shape of an arrowhead into the clay. And then we got the tongs. We got the cat food can. The cat food can was steel, right? Steel is not, you're not melting steel in a bonfire, or at least not the kind of bonfire we were building. So the can was fine. So we just took the tongs and put them in there and grabbed the can, and I brought it out, and I poured it into the mold, and it worked. So and we did it a few times. But before I show this stuff, this one I don't have, which is kind of disappointing. But after we were done with that, for some reason we thought maybe we can melt aluminum. And so we got a Coke can and cut it up and stuck it in this steel cat food can. And sure enough, we melted the aluminum. And I made something out of the aluminum, but it's gone. I don't know what happened to it. Here, I'm going to look up real quick what the melting point. So zinc melts at 787 degrees. So that already is pretty darn hot. And then the melting point of aluminum, it says, is 1,221 degrees. Now, you can say I'm making up the part about the aluminum. I don't have the proof in front of me, but I'm going to show you what I made out of the zinc. So it was at least that hot. And then the melting point, I guess the melting point of steel is going to vary based on what kind of steel it is. But yeah, it says here, steel is just the element. Iron has been processed to contain carbon. Iron and the ground is melted. So it says iron melts at 1,510 degrees C, which is 2,750 Fahrenheit. So yeah, that's why that wasn't melting. I don't know, a month or two ago, I went home and visited my mom, and I hadn't been home to visit my mom in a long time, just because normally she comes up here. And I still had a few things in my closet, or what was my closet. My room is, of course, was long ago repurposed, but sort of in the shelf in the closet, there was a little pile of stuff that still was mine. That, I don't know, I was going to make a video and just talk about some of it, but I don't know how interesting it would really be. But I found these things, and so I got excited about that. So, and again, not because any of this is really impressive. I just think the fact that we did it at all is what's impressive. So this was what was supposed to be the arrowhead. Hopefully it's going to focus there. And so you see it's shaped like an arrow, but the problem is look how thick it is. So, I mean, that's pretty silly. But yeah, I mean, it worked. And it's pretty heavy because it's made out of zinc. But you know, I don't know. That one's pretty neat. And then another one that I made was I just got a penny that, you know, wasn't melted and pushed it down into the clay to make like a little hole. And then I poured some molten zinc on top of it, and then I stuck another penny on top of it, and then just let that harden. And the non-melted pennies didn't melt or really even stick that bad to the molten stuff. So once it was all cooled off, I was able to pull them off. So that just made like this little cylinder looking thing, but I don't know which side looks better. You can kind of see, I don't know if this is going to really come through on camera, but you can kind of see, yeah, the indentation of one of the pennies on there. Yeah. And then this last thing, I don't know what this was even supposed to be. It kind of looks like a baseball cap, but it wasn't. That's not what it was supposed to be. It was just like, I think I just maybe stuck my thumb down into the clay, and then I think the hole just got overfilled. So I think it was supposed to end up being like some kind of like half sphere, but it got overfilled, and so it made this little lip thing. So I don't know. I don't even know why I kept it, but I don't know. I just thought it was cool. I don't think I even realized necessarily that I still had those anymore. So, but you know, can you imagine though, if my mom and my grandma had known what we as two 13 or 14-year-olds were doing, in their house while they were gone? Because then after that was done, we stopped feeding the fire, let it cool off. I think I just, I put the top back on, and just wheeled the. I don't think I even cleaned out the thing, because it's going to take hours for all the for everything to cool back off, like the embers to cool off. But we didn't use that thing that often, so I think I just put the lid back on, and I just rolled the thing, you know, back onto the patio, and we cleaned everything up. And you know, 5 o'clock rolls around, and my mom comes home, and my grandma comes home, and they just had no idea what we had done, which I thought was cool. I told her like sometime way later. Because, you know, it had been years, and so she didn't even care anymore. I think she just kind of shook her head that, you know, she couldn't believe that we had done that. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's just sort of a selection of a few Stewart stories. You know, probably a few others will just sort of come out organically as I'm talking about stuff, and we're not going to stop talking about them yet. But it was just like, I just wanted to try to maybe give a sense of what it was like, just being friends with Stewart, and how much different it was for me than you know, being friends with Jonathan. So, but you know, this is still Flashback, and so we still have to talk about video games at least a little bit after over 45 minutes. So, I talked about in the last episode how Stuart got the hand-me-down color monitor from his dad. And you know, I thought that was really awesome, and so that I ended up, you know, figuring out how to also get a color monitor for myself. And the next big change, which probably happened during freshman year of high school. Speaking of which, I know I did a flashback episode that was just called, you know, middle school, or whatever the hell it was called. I'm not going to do that for high school, just because how can you sum up high school in one video? I mean. So I'll talk more about high school probably later. You know, I think high school for me became more memorable for how miserable I was after Stewart moved away. So, but I think this would have been towards like the end of my freshman year, or sometime during freshman year, I should say. Stewart got a new computer, kind of, because he got another hand-me-down from his dad. I think his dad probably was upgrading from like a 386 to a 486. And so Stewart got his dad's old 386, which of course was going to open up, you know, whole new worlds as far as games that we could play. And I guess this is an important component to the story, but Stewart and I obviously went to the same middle school, but we did not go to the same high school. He got into some like magnet school. I don't know if that is a term that means anything to most people. Like a magnet school is like, I guess now they have like charter schools, but this was a public school, but it was really meant for kids who wanted to get into like technology. You know, like this was a school that had like a robust computer program. Whereas, you know, the high school that I went to probably had maybe like one computer class or something. And so, but more importantly is, so this school had like a higher concentration of computer nerds, for lack of a better term. So like Stuart made made friends with all these like other computer people, and so they're like swapping discs back and forth. And so all of a sudden, like Stuart's bringing home all these new games, and then of course he's sharing them with me. And the first really memorable game that I remember playing that he got from school was the shareware version of Wolfenstein 3D. And this was, of course, at a time where, like, well, I didn't even have the 386 yet. He had the 386, but no sound card. So we were just playing it through the PC speaker. But I just, Wolfenstein 3D, and I'll talk about it more because we'll play the game just a little bit. But it was like unlike any game I had ever seen. Being, it was this first person perspective. I know it's not actually 3D, but, when at that age, like to us, it was 3D. And that gave it this level of immersion where, even when you weren't like, running away from bad guys or killing bad guys, just being in that 3D world and just the exploration you could do. I mean, it really blew us away. We had never played, because I know that it's not like the first person perspective game, right? I mean, there's like all the SSI gold box games, the AD&D games. We had never played any of those. Like we were coming from playing mostly Sierra adventure games, plus just like a few other like random shareware games, plus things like Arkanoid, SimCity, or playing Nintendo games. Like we would rent the occasional Nintendo game. I mentioned on a previous show that he had a Nintendo, but all he had was Super Mario Brothers and Top Gun. But we rented like Marble Madness together. But so for us, when he got his hands on Wolfenstein 3D, I mean, it was like no pun intended, it was like a game changer. Just because it sucked us in a way we had never seen before. And if he hadn't gotten that 386, I don't believe we would have been able to play it. I don't know what the minimum specs are. Well, I've got here, I don't know why I brought it out to show or whatever, but I have a boxed copy of Spear of Destiny. Just because I don't have any kind of physical release. Actually, I have. Well, does anybody want to wait while I go get it? Well, all right, hold on. All right, so if anyone cares, so this was the shareware version of Wolfenstein 3D. This came on a single. I mean, it was distributed many different ways. This says it's from Mega Mouse Software. This is actually still sealed. I mean, that doesn't make it worth anything. It's just I think I got this at Portland Retro Gaming Expo for like a couple bucks, and I have no reason to really open it because it just has the shareware version of Wolfenstein 3D on it. But yeah, I got Spear of Destiny here anyway. But I don't know, what point was I even trying to make? We just thought it was a really cool game. Oh yeah, the minimum specification. So it says here on the box that you have to have at least a 286 to play Spear of Destiny. I don't know if you could get away with anything lower, because here on this shareware disc, it says minimum requirements 386 or higher. So I don't know, maybe you could play on a 286 and just get like a really bad frame rate. I don't know, I'm not really sure, but that was the thing that really made me feel like, oh, I have to get a 386 now. But that was going to be hard to do, right? Because it wasn't cheap. And I could tell the story while I'm standing here, but to be honest, I feel like we could go ahead and what I'll probably do is I'll just play through the first level or two, and then I can maybe talk about the game a little bit more. And we're just going to play it using the PC speaker for reasons that will become clear maybe in the next episode of Flashback. But then I'll also tell the story about how I got my 386. So that's enough of me standing here. So let's check out one of my all-time favorite games, Wolfenstein 3D for MS-DOS. Move this a little bit closer, maybe. All right, so we got the game all loaded up here. Obviously, now I'm down in the basement. And, you saw I overlaid some footage in the first part of the show. When I was talking about the starter jacket, somehow I totally forgot that I still have my my Red Sox starter jacket. So how cool is that? It's only a medium, so it only kind of fits. I don't know. The way these things fit is kind of weird. Like, the shoulders are plenty broad enough and the arms are long enough, but it's just pretty short. So I probably wouldn't really want to wear it outside the house anymore. But like I said, it was one of the last things my dad probably ever gave. Well, maybe not. I mean, I got it in 8th grade. So, but I mean, anyway, it was a gift from my dad. So it's cool that I still have it. So, for anybody that watches the flashback episodes but doesn't watch the live streams, this is kind of what the live streams usually are usually like. You know, I have usually a specific overlay depending on what kind of system we're playing. So today, you know, we're playing a retro computer game, right? So sorry, I just fixed that. We're playing like a retro computer game. So I have this like old computer style overlay that a viewer named Yura made for me. So that was pretty cool. And I mean, we just sit here and play games, and I tell stories and interact with people in the chat room. So, you know, even if normally maybe live streaming is not your thing, you know, maybe check it out sometime. But anyway, so as I said in the first part of the video, this was probably the first game that Stuart and I played that took advantage of his then new 386. And at that time, we didn't have sound cards. And so I wanted to change the settings here in Wolfenstein to better mimic the way we played it back then. So there's the cool title screen there. And yeah, so I'm just going to go through here and I'm going to change the sound. Oh, the sound already says PC speaker. So cool. So I just want to make sure everything was, so there's going to be PC speaker sound effects, and then there's not going to be any digitized sound or music because we didn't have that back then. Did it save my control settings then too? I'm using a USB controller just because I have like a clicky keyboard down here, and yeah, it did. And I think that if I try to play it with the keyboard, it's just going to be really loud because you guys are going to hear a lot of key clicks and whatnot. And the last thing I want to do is make sure that, yep, that's maximized. So we're good to go. Okay, so we're just going to go to a new game here, and this is the full version. I should mention we're not playing this on like original hardware. I downloaded this from that GOG website, and yeah, so we're playing it that way. And so this is, you know, we had the shareware version, so you only would have had episode 1, Escape from Wolfenstein. But that's still like something like 6 levels or something of play. I mean, it would take you probably, I don't know, a long time. It took us a long time to beat just the episode 1, and to have all 6 episodes, it was hours and hours of gameplay. So that's pretty cool. So we're just going to select episode 1, and then I just always thought this was really cool that it let you choose your difficulty setting, but then it changed the little the face of BJ there. I don't know, I just always thought that was funny. That he's a little baby thing, and then Death Incarnate, he looks all evil. I think generally we just kept it on the default setting, which is bring them on. And yeah, so I mean, I'll probably just end up playing through like the first couple of levels, and just maybe talking about the game a little bit, and talking about getting my 386, and then we'll just call it a day. I mean, I think the video, I've already edited the first part of the video, and I mean, it's like 45 minutes long or something, so I don't want to make it too terribly much longer. Now, so one thing, I don't know what it is with, I don't know if it's a DOSBox thing or what, but I was only able to configure 2 of the buttons on the gamepad. So I don't have strafe or run, which I don't really use run that much, but strafe is pretty handy. So like I said in the intro, like we had never played a game like this. I don't know if people consider Wolfenstein 3D to be like the original first-person shooter, or I guess I don't know how it's considered. It was certainly the first, like I said, not just the first-person shooter that we played, but really the first sort of 3D. I understand the game's not 3D from graphics perspective, but it was the first game that took place in like a 3-dimensional world that we had played. So yeah, we were pretty excited about it, just because of that. Because like I said, just walking around here and just exploring and trying to figure out how to get out was for us really cool. And but I wanted to tell sort of, I don't know, it's not even really a story, I guess, but I just wanted to talk about getting my computer upgraded. and it's not really that great of a story, which is why I didn't bother telling it in the first part of this video. But also, now we got a machine gun. This is my favorite weapon of the game, by the way. There's a machine gun that's like more powerful than this, more like a minigun. But I don't really like that one as much. I feel like this weapon is kind of perfect, unless you're fighting a boss. Then you want the minigun. But anyway, I actually did try to kind of talk about getting my 386 in the first part of this video, and I had to edit it out because I was mistaken. In fact, the game audio is a little bit too loud. Like I was mistaken about what I said. I know for sure that I was a freshman in high school when all of this happened, when Stuart got his 386 and then I got mine. And I sort of had hypothesized that, maybe it was like a birthday present. The money, like maybe my mom and my grandma helped me out with some of the money as a birthday present. And then I realized that couldn't be the case because I know what I got for my birthday my freshman year, and it wasn't a computer. So the only thing I could really think is, that my dad passed away halfway through my freshman year of high school. And so maybe my mom and my grandma helped me out getting a new computer. Just maybe they felt bad and were trying to do something nice for me. But even that's just a guess. I really just don't remember. But what basically happened was, I was trying to do it sort of as cheaply as possible. And so remember that at this time I had that Epson Equity, and it had a VGA card in it. I had a VGA monitor, and it had a 20 megabyte hard drive in it. And I think that's pretty much all the upgrades. It may or may not have had a modem in it yet, but we'll talk about modems later anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But that's about it. So what I ended up doing was I went down to sort of the neighborhood computer store, which if you watch the episodes that I did talking about Radio Shack, I mentioned that when I interviewed for my job at Radio Shack, I don't want to take a shortcut there, but when I interviewed for the job to work at that Radio Shack, I lied and said I worked at this neighborhood computer shop that had gone out of business. And that was the computer shop where I ended up getting my computer upgraded. And I've said this before, but it was the kind of place where you walked in and it was very sparse. It didn't they put no time or effort into making the place look nice, because that really wasn't the point. It had a big dry erase board over the counter that had all the prices on it. It listed out, here are the different processors they had, what they cost, the different types of RAM, and sort of the amounts, of RAM, if you wanted a 1 meg stick or whatever, and, hard drives, et cetera, because, at that time, the prices of all those things fluctuated quite a bit. Those things were like a commodity. It was like I said, I think I said this in a previous video, it was like buying fish, and you were going to pay that day's market rate. And that was a close one. And so basically what I did is I took my Epson into the store, and so I didn't have a computer for I don't know, a couple days or at least, and basically had the guys use anything they possibly could out of my old computer and build me a new computer. And so I didn't get a new hard drive, for instance. I didn't get a new monitor or VGA card because I didn't need those things. And so basically what I got was a new case, because I had to have a new, my old case would not have been compatible with a new computer. But I got a new motherboard, a new CPU, some RAM, a case, and a 3.5-inch floppy drive, because I didn't have, all I had was I had one 5.25-inch drive left in my Epson, because the other 5.25-inch bay got taken up by the hard drive that I ended up getting from Stuart's dad. And but what I remember is I still wanted to have a 5.25-inch floppy drive, because I had a lot of stuff on 5.25-inch discs. But I was being so cheap that I didn't want to buy a new drive, and so they took one of the 5.25-inch drives. Well, they took the only 5.25-inch drive, I guess, that was left in in the Epson, but it had kind of a custom faceplate on it that had like these little pieces hanging off of it, and they had to kind of work to sort of jam it into this new case. But it worked. And I don't. They kept my old computer or whatever was left of it, which wasn't much. I mean, it would have just been, the motherboard, CPU, RAM, and the case for the old one. So like this new, even though I upgraded to this 386, it still just had the 20 megabyte MFM hard drive in it, which I guess was also a problem. But I don't know. Somehow they got it to work. I don't know if somehow that computer didn't want to run with the MFM controller card that it had. I don't really know. But so what I ended up getting was I got a 386 DX40. 486s were already out by then. I mean, this would have been, sometime in like the late winter, early spring of 1992. And so you could get a 486 then, but that was like real, cutting edge stuff, and I couldn't afford that. But somebody out there can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't. Are there 386s faster than a DX40? I just don't remember. Did they make anything that was like 50, 60 megahertz? I don't remember. And, for anybody not familiar with sort of the naming conventions used, it was a DX instead of an SX because it had a math coprocessor integrated into the CPU, which I wonder if I even got anything out of that, because you had to be running software that took advantage of a math coprocessor. And, like for instance, I was going to buy a math coprocessor for the Tandy 1000, but there's just not that. In fact, actually, I think I did buy a math coprocessor for the Tandy 1000, but I just didn't bother putting it in because there's just not that much software that would even take advantage of it. I thought there was a secret over here. Oh yeah, there it is. So my point is just, see, so there's that's the minigun. So you see this, it just fires like crazy, but it goes through your ammo too quick. And I just think it's kind of overkill for just fighting these regular guys. And, so anyway, I got the 386 DX40, maybe I should have gotten an SX25. I don't really know. I got, 4 megabytes of RAM, and like I said, it was a high density 3.5 inch floppy drive, and that's it. And I was pretty happy with that. Obviously, it would have been nice to have a bigger hard drive, but I would end up getting one of those a little bit down the road. Really, at that time, it wasn't something that I needed that bad. So I really wanted to just have the faster processor in the short term, purely because I wanted to play this game. Pretty sure there's a secret in this room too, but I can't. This game has tons and tons of secrets in it, but I mean, anybody watching this probably already knows that. But so you want to go around and like push on all the panels, but that's not really fun to watch. So, but one of the things I think that made this game a little bit extra cool for Stuart and I is that we were both taking German, even though, like I said, we weren't in the same high school, but we had just, for whatever reason, we had agreed that we were both going to take German as our foreign language in high school. And speaking of which, we used to call these guys Mustafas because it sounds like that's what they're saying when they see you. Like, I guess they're saying Schutzstaffel. Schutz hard to say. Schutzstaffel. I don't know. They're saying whatever SS stands for. Schutzstaffel. But, it's muffled, right? And well, if you're playing through the PC speaker, they don't say anything, but when you have a sound card, they say Schutzstaffel, but it just sounds like Mustafa. So we used to call him Mustafa. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know if I had anything else to say. It's funny, after I recorded the first part, I thought of a bunch of more Stewart stories, but I mean, not necessarily anything awesome. But we're going to talk about Stewart more in the next episode. So that way I saved some stuff for next time. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, anyway, so, that's why, like I said, I didn't bother, turning this whole 386 upgrade thing into its own video, just because, I don't think it's really that interesting of a story. I just went and I got a 386, and, like I said, I don't know where the money came from. I don't know how much working I did to help kind of pay for that. I don't remember how much it cost. I mean, I'm sure I could just look that up, but, hope this game audio isn't still too loud. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to turn this into some long Let's Play or something. I still love this game. I don't play it that often, so it's funny. It doesn't take long before I just kind of get lost. Like, I think I'm already lost, but it's because I'm trying to talk too much. But yeah, I mean, that's Wolfenstein 3D. I mean, I think everybody has, seen the game by now, and there's plenty of cool ways to play this game, even if you don't want to play it on a computer. It came out on, it ended up coming out on most video game systems, but it's got a Jaguar version that's pretty good. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm probably just going to go ahead and stop right there, actually, just because I don't want this to get all long and drawn out. But so yeah, so the next episode, we won't be talking about computers because we're going to talk about what I got for my birthday freshman year, which seems to be an episode people have been kind of waiting for, and hopefully it's not anticlimactic. But and then after that, we'll talk about computer stuff again, and unfortunately, we'll have to say goodbye to Stuart. So that'll do it for this episode of Flashback. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.